Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying tuned to part 2 of the webinar. And we have 4 panelists from Queen's University joining us here today. Just quickly going over LEAP, we're basically trying to help high school students and also incoming first-year students with their transition to university. And so hopefully this panel in particular will be very informative for those looking to go to Queen's or their incoming first years in September. So yeah, just a few housekeeping things. Please have your if you're just attending, just have your camera and audio muted. And if you do have any questions throughout the panel, feel free to just plot the questions into the chat box. Our panelists will try their very best to answer your questions. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll try to answer them in the Q&A at the very end. So without further ado, let's just quickly introduce our 4 panelists for today. You guys have seen their, brief intro. You've seen their videos on our Instagram, on our Facebook, on our LinkedIn. Like Michael had a whole adventure around campus, it looks like, with I don't know, it was like geese or something. That was pretty funny. So yeah, let's introduce everyone. And yeah, this is just the agenda. So we'll go over the questions that you guys have submitted. Thank you so much for your questions. We'll go through the panel discussion and then go on to the Q&A. So let's start with Michael.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Michael. I'm a 4th-year life science student. So with any luck, I won't ever meet any of you at Queen's, and I'll be gone. I'll be off to doing other things. For now, until then, I work with Synapse, which is a national pitch competition for research projects. So essentially, if you go far enough in the competition, you get your research funded by Synapse, which is really cool. Another thing I started doing this summer is I am working at the Queen's Cancer Research Institute as part of my 4th-year research project, looking at lung cancer. And as far as my employment, I started working at an on-campus pub called the Queen's Pub. Under Queen's loves its acronyms, so you'll see a lot of them, but they call it TAPS. And I started in the kitchen, worked my way to the bar, and now I'm the kitchen manager. And then in my 2nd year, I was also involved with Orientation Week, and I was a gecko for NEWTS, which stands for New Exchange and Worldly Transfer Students. So I got to meet a whole bunch of people from all over the world, and now I'm welcome in places from Australia, Denmark, and it's amazing. But my most identifying quality is that I am a West Campus survivor. West is best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And then we have Michelle.
Hi guys, so my name is Michelle and I'm going into my 2nd year in commerce. This year, for summer, I'm basically working on camps and also just helping some small businesses in terms of reopening strategies for dealing with this whole situation that we're in right now. And as of right now, for next summer, I have an internship with PwC in their tax division. And just on campus, I'm involved in a couple of clubs. So I compete on the Queen's Case Competition Union, which travels around the world to compete at different competitions. And also I'm a part of the Queen's Accounting Association and basically just helping to organize some events to help any incoming students who are interested in accounting as a profession. And just as a fun little fact about me, I also used to compete on Team Canada for Taekwondo.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle. Then we have Sophia.
I am going into my 3rd year at chemical engineering at Queen's. I chose to go into chemical engineering because I've always loved math and science, but I'm really interested in like energy and how clean energy works. And so that's why I kind of decided to go into chemical engineering. This is also why last summer I was an intern at Hatch, which is an engineering consulting company in Mississauga. And I studied a lot of renewable and clean energy there. This year, I'm the director of sponsorship at Queen's Global Energy Conference, which is an engineering conference at Queen's. And we just kind of talk about energy, as I've said that word like 10 times. I'm a volunteer at the AMS Food Bank at Queen's too, which I love doing. It's like a little known fact that there's actually a great food bank resource at Queen's. And so I work there just trying to keep the place running and trying to also get the word out. And I love to dance, I love to bake, and I like space. Like I like to talk about space.
Awesome. It seems like so far all of our panelists have lots of different like, passion projects or like, other things that they're interested in besides the program or the industry they're pursuing, which is really, really cool. And last but not least, we have Jacob.
Hey guys, my name is Jacob. I'm actually a Western transfer, but I did my first 2 years at Queen's University. I studied economics, and I was a former vice president at SWAM, which is an organization that aims to provide affordable swimming lessons to children with disabilities. And I was the marketing director for Queen's Pre-Law Society. For the summer, I'm a financial assistant at Habitat for Humanity. And I really like swimming. I love basketball, and I honestly listen to history podcasts like 7 hours a day. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So now that we gotten to know all of our panelists a bit more, we're gonna just be discussing these few topics today. And so to start off, why don't we, put that question out there? Why did you choose Queen's University? And why don't we go have everyone answer this? So let's start with maybe Sophia. Oh yeah. Or do you need some time to think maybe, or?
I think I can start. I chose Queen's because I know there's a great reputation for Queen's engineering program. I know that engineering can be very difficult. And so because Queen's engineering is known to be very communal and just very tight knit, I wanted to go in a program that kind of like had those qualities just to make my like struggle at school a bit easier, to have friends also in the same struggle. And I also decided to go to Queen's because I was selected as a Schulich leader there. And so that's why I'm at Queen's.
Okay, awesome. And then Michael, do you want to touch a bit on your choice at Queen's?
Sure. Yeah, I came because I've known for a long time that I was interested in cancer research, and so specifically for the Queen's Cancer Research Institute, I knew that would be part of my program, and I knew that I'd have the opportunity to work in there. So that's sort of been the inspiration for Queen's. But on top of that, it reminds me a lot of my hometown. I'm from Hamilton, and so it's another sort of old city on the water. So I like to get out on the water as much as possible. So that was another swing vote for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think like besides, when you're choosing university, besides looking at the program, the opportunities that exist, it's a lot also, you have to take the environment into consideration as well, whether it's something you'd enjoy to spend, your next 4 years at. So really good point. Michelle?
I think for me, the biggest draw in terms of Queen's was just the way the program that I'm in is structured. So I really like how, unlike a lot of other business programs, it's business right from the beginning and you have 4 years of general. And I found that was something that was really important to me because it really gave me a chance to choose exactly what I wanted to do in business because it's such a broad field. And I think another thing for me is that I really like the smaller program size because, like Sophia mentioned, it really helps with having that community sense and having people you can talk to easily and are sort of going through this a similar situation as you and experiencing the same things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that I think like definitely the community aspect is a really big part. I think, and especially since you already knew like you wanted to go into business, you really wanted to have like a deep dive into and really explore that field. The 4 years does give you a lot of opportunities there. And then finally, Jacob, would you like to touch why you chose Queen's initially, and then kind of walk us through your your decision process and committing to Western in the end?
Right. Of course. Thank you, Caitlin. When employers ask why I chose Queen's, I usually go with the academic rigor and the prestige. In reality, I came because it seemed like a fun school. I wasn't like a very good high school student and I didn't have the best marks. So I came into Queen's to do physics because it was something I wanted to do. And the water was right there. I could go swimming every day in the summer and the campus was absolutely beautiful. Now, as I kind of like transitioned through university and figured out what I wanted to do, I actually quit physics in first year and transferred to economics. So I went from the science faculty to the arts faculty. And then from economics, I found that I took a couple commerce courses in economics, and I found out that I really like business. So I applied to transfer to Ivy, and I was accepted, and I am off to Western for September.
Okay, awesome. Definitely, I think because we have a lot of high school students that are sitting on this webinar today, and I'm sure they probably think like, you know, when it comes to decisions like this, like if you choose to go to a certain school or you choose to do like a certain program, you have to stick to it, or there's not a lot of leeway. But it's really interesting to hear like from Jacob's perspective, where he kind of changed you know, his field or the program as well as the school. So keep in mind, like there's definitely a lot of opportunities open and options open as you do your research and you learn more about yourself. So going into the next question, so what are some common mistakes that first years make at Queen's, and kind of what would you tell your first year self? So does anyone want to start with this question? Okay, so why don't we start, Sophia? Okay.
I think a common mistake you can make in first year is putting too much pressure on yourself, maybe to perform academically. At least for people maybe who did like IB or AP, because I did IB in high school, there was this rumor going around that like, oh, if you did IB, then like first year is going to be really easy. It's like you're not going to need to study, you can just like party all the time, things like that. And so I kind of went into the idea that I'd get into university and the first year would be kind of easy, I wouldn't really have to work too hard. But in fact, like the opposite was my reality, and I found that I kind of underestimated how much I should study. Just because I did like an advanced program in high school. So I think that like something that was my common mistake was just maybe like slacking off my work because I was excited to be very social. However, at the same time, first year is like really fun because you get to meet a lot of new people. I went into my program with like knowing probably 2 people from my high school who weren't in any of my classes. And so it was really fun to be in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I think like definitely, yeah, like when you go into university, like everything is just, it's kind of like a fresh start. So it's super exciting. So many opportunities. It's really easy to kind of like get lost in it all and get sidetracked from school or from your academic stuff. So it's really important to keep in mind that like university is definitely not easy, and you just got to keep on that grind. And maybe we can just hear from Michelle, as she just, you know, went through first year. Yeah, any thoughts about this question?
Yeah, so I think for me, one really important thing is also the social aspect. But I think more in the sense of, for me, because I'm usually more introverted, so just putting yourself out there sometimes can be a little more challenging. But I think it's also really important going to university to find the right group of people. So especially with Queens, there can be a reputation for it to be a party school, and there is that pressure to sort of fit in, go to parties, go to all these social activities, but that isn't for everyone, and that just isn't everyone's personality. So finding a group of people where you sort of fit in, you can be yourself, and like they have a similar preference in terms of the social aspect, and like it doesn't matter what program they're in at the end of the day, as long as you find a group of people that you can really rely on and just be yourself with, because you don't want to be like faking an entirely different personality for 4 years, and it's really going to make it more difficult for you if you don't start off like trying to find different groups of people that you fit well into.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think like when you go into university, there's a lot of different types of people, right? So definitely like just be yourself, be genuine, and you'll definitely find your right group. Like it might take time, but it's most important that you stay genuine and you're kind to others. So we're just gonna move on to the next question, and we can maybe have Michael and Jacob answer this, and Sophia can also touch upon this. But how is the social life, environment, and culture like at Queen's, and also I guess in the broader sense at Kingston? So let's start with Michael.
Sure. I think an important way to sort of conceptualize university in general is just that it's a much bigger high school taken to much bigger extremes. So you're still going to have like these pockets of people that have their own interests, and everybody does different things. Some people are quiet. I for one, I drink here and there, but I don't smoke, don't do hard drugs or anything like that. Most of that has to do with the fact that I work in a lab that studies lung cancer. So yeah. But in terms of like party life and stuff, you sort of, it's almost like a cartoon when you walk down the street and you see people just acting like fools and stuff. I'll try to be quick, but I have one story. It was in my second year, and I came out of like 8 hours of studying at the library, and I just sort of walked home, and my housemates were throwing something, and at the time we had this big, it was like a big pink lawn flamingo in the front yard, and it was hollow. And so what they had done at the time is they cut the tail off of it and they cut the beak off of it, and they filled it with tequila. And the moment I got home, they were like, "Hey, you studied long enough." And before I knew it, I was on my back and I was funneling tequila out of a flamingo. So I'm not saying that's going to happen to you. I'm just saying you can avoid that and you can do other things, but that does exist at Queens. And so as somebody that's pursuing an academic career in research and stuff like that, I would suggest to focus on academics more than you would on your social life, because at the end of the day, when you think about any singular course at Queens, if you have one course, one semester, you would get an A+ in that course, no doubt. But the fact that you have, like, say 4, 5, or 6 courses, then that's why you see certain people sort of trailing off, and that's when so it's hard to just keep on top of your stuff. So my seasoned advice would be to learn your schedule. You can have fun outside of studying. You don't necessarily have to spend 8 hours at a library like I did, but that's my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. I think, like, in that sense, there's like a lot of choice, right? Everything you do, like, because you're in university, there's a lot of freedom. You're pretty independent, so it really comes down to like your choice, whether you want to like things like the whole flamingo and the tequila. It happens, but
yeah, it's also because I live with lunatics, so, and I chose those lunatics to live with. So actually I think Jacob knows Christian, right? Maybe, yeah, he's one of them. But you make your own bubble and you follow. That's sort of why I was relating it to high school. It's very much the same in the sense that you don't have to be worried that you're going to suddenly become, I don't know, some Chad that wears flip-flops and I don't know, whatever. Like, you're not going to change if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing some sort of some comments here about like the whole stolen by Smith thing. I don't know if you want some white guy to start going off about that kind of stuff, but so Michelle's in commerce, I think, so maybe she has the inside scoop.
Yeah, so the question was, how do I feel about, or in general, how do we feel about recent racism issues brought to light in Stolen by Smith? So I would definitely say that some of those experiences I have seen, or I know of people who have been in similar situations. So definitely some of the stories I can really personally relate to. But at the same time, I can't with every single story. So not every single story there is reflective of each individual's experience, but that isn't to say that those stories aren't important and that they don't need to be heard. I think in general, a lot of the population at Smith in commerce has realized that administration has been really, really lacking in terms of pushing for this. So starting with Stolen by Smith, there have been a lot of changes being pushed for by students. And I think it's really important to highlight all of those issues, and those are being brought to light more and more now. And I think that's a super important thing. And hopefully we'll see those changes. So far, the response hasn't been up to par in terms of what a lot of people have been expecting. And there has been a lot of push from students. And I think it's really good to see that change coming from the students, because they are ultimately the ones that it needs to start with, because it is us that are in that position and we're the ones who are experiencing that and we know what it feels like. So I think there have been historical issues and they are going to continue. It's going to happen at any university to some extent. And there is no way to sort of expect a program not to have that. And for me personally, I went into Smith and I went into commerce expecting some level of it, which isn't good in a sense. And no, you shouldn't, I guess it isn't the best situation to be in, but it is the reality of being in university and being in a business program, or even in any university program in general.
No, like I think, in light of all the, the different like issues or like racism anecdotes that have been brought up, there's a lot that not just like Queens, but across Canada, all the universities can really do a better job of. And I think it's just really important to, like Michelle said, shed light on this and really push for administration to make these tangible changes. But yeah, I think just keeping in mind that like all the students can do a better job of raising awareness of pushing for this to happen and to make sure it's like the system's going to improve in that sense is just what's key. And then Sophia, do you want to quickly talk about your point of view of social life or the environment at Queens?
Yeah, for sure. I would consider myself a very social person, and so for that reason, one of them I really like Queens because there's a very strong social aspect at Queens. All of my friends go to different universities that are commuter schools, so like schools where most people don't live on residence or schools where all the campus buildings are far apart. Like a common complaint between them is that they don't really know many other people, just because it's hard to get to know people when no one is living in like the same area, or like when the campus is very spread out. And so just the fact that Queens is so small and that you can walk the entire diameter of the campus within 15 minutes. And then most people also live within campus or like right in the perimeter. I really like how that makes the school really close-knit that way. And like when you're on Queens campus, you could just like kind of tell that you're on Queens campus because everyone around you is a student. And then just, yeah. So I like the sense of community in that sense. Also just because, as I mentioned before, for academics, I get really stressed with school. Even though I think I do well, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well. And so I find it really helpful that a lot of my friends find that their respective programs are very tight-knit, especially engineering. There's a lot of traditions in engineering that make it kind of crazy, but also very fun.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have like that tight-knit group where you can support one another, whether it's like with academic or career-related endeavors, and definitely like having that close community is very key. And maybe Jacob can just touch upon what do you think are the best parts about campus from your experience?
I guess the most positive things about the campus is that when you're walking down, or when you're walking through the campus, when it's raining, snowing, sunny, whatever, it really feels like you're on a campus. And I can't stress that enough. Because Queens is so small and because Queens like pretty much exists in this nice bubble, when you're on school and when you're walking to class with a cup of coffee in your hand, it really feels like you're there to learn. And it really feels like you're there as a Queens student. And it really feels like you're a part of a community. I guess that's like one very big positive aspect about Queens.
Awesome. Yeah, so it really goes back to the really nice community at Queens. Okay, so moving on to academics. I think for a lot of high school students or like incoming first years, they're curious about bird courses or courses that might make their schedule a bit lighter. So are there any specific bird courses for first years and any notable professors that you guys might want to touch on? So let's go with Jacob again to talk about his
Yeah, for sure. Out of all the courses I've taken, personally, Music 171 was my favorite bird course. It's about the social history of music, I believe. So we start all the way from like the blues and then go through time and stop at death metal, I believe, or just metal and rock. And then another course I really want to recommend is, if you're interested, Philosophy 111 with Sergio Sismondo. It's not a bird course technically. It is a pretty difficult course, but what it does is that it gives you an introduction to all the different types of philosophies, all the ways that society kind of constructs itself, and just different thoughts and different, I guess, philosophies as to how the Western civilization runs. And I really don't want to say something negative, but if you don't have to take it, or if you aren't super passionate about psychology, try and avoid Psych 100. I did well in the course, but I honestly had probably the worst experience ever from taking that course. I would not recommend it whatsoever.
Okay. Thank you so much. And then Michael, do you want to touch upon your course recommendations?
Yeah, I'll piggy off what Jacob said. Definitely, if you're not interested in the sciences, psych's not for you. But if you do plan, say, to go to med school down the line, I would highly recommend taking Psych 100. Somebody's asking a question. It's just tough. Like that's somebody asked why it's not good, and it's just it's a lot of information, and you gotta learn a lot, and it takes a lot of your time. So I guess that's its downfall. But you do learn a lot if you pay attention.
If I can just, sorry,
yeah.
Michael, if I can just scoop in there, I just wanted to specifically say that Psych 100 isn't very good because one, it's really tough, like Michael said. There's a lot of information that you have to regurgitate. And secondly, the professors don't do a very good job of explaining the material in terms of how well you can do in the course. So what I mean by that is that they'll give you 20 lecture slides that you have to memorize, and then all the exam questions will be application based, and they will not give you any sort of guidance on that. So I guess just to reiterate, it's really tough. There's a lot of information, and two, it's just not very well structured, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Mike.
No, that's absolutely true. They don't really throw you a bone. It's very independent, but you'll find that in a lot of courses as well. Not in Astronomy 101. I took that last year, and believe it or not, I still don't know the order of the planets. We talked about so many things, but not the solar system.
Okay.
And another one is Anatomy 100, and that's sort of if you got an interest in biology or science. For me, I had to take anatomy in second year. I had to take 215 and 216, which is like it's like a Nat 100 on crack. So a Nat 100 is just sort of the intro, the very basics, the arm bones connected to the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So yeah, I think with bird courses, it's difficult because they can be bird, like it really depends on your interest. So the general recommendation or the general consensus is like it's only bird if it's something you can, like, you're actually interested in, and also it's something that it won't take too much time out of your day, but definitely depends on the person. But yeah, this must be very helpful to some of our attendees today. Does anyone in particular want to speak a bit about like the program difficulty? I know in general, like, yes, some programs can be hard, but generally you can overcome it. Generally you just have to put in the work and the effort. Does anyone just in particular want to touch on their program?
I've been getting a lot of questions.
Okay.
Just about, that's why I can see my typing. My camera's like at the bottom.
Yeah, no worries.
I've been getting a lot of questions about IB in particular and how it helped me in my transition to university, because it is described as like a university preparatory kind of program. And obviously the experience is very different for everyone who did IB, but personally, let me just read the questions I actually have. Sorry. I found it was actually very helpful in a lot of my courses in first year, just because most of the material that you already learned in your science courses, like your physics and your chemistry, whatever you took that was like a high level course, is already covered in your first year, and also like a little more. So a lot of my second year courses are like covering what I learned in high school. However, something that I found that wasn't very helpful in IB is that if you didn't take a higher level course, so I didn't take high level math, the math in first year, like the calculus in first year, is going to be harder. And math isn't my strong suit, even though I really like STEM. And so you still like, I think there's a lot of false kind of like security that people feel when they do IB and they go into first year. And then someone asked me if the amount of IB work is the same as the amount of university work. I think it depends on how your school did IB, because some schools would make you have like a quiz every week, and my school only had like one test every 3 months for each of my courses. So I say that it depends. And my last IB question, or just the last thing I want to say was just that something that I had trouble with like going into first year was the quality of like your lectures and like your learning time is not going to be as good as high school. Because like I remember I had my physics course in high school with 7 people. it was 2 hours long, and I was able to learn a lot just talking to the teacher. But here, like, you're gonna just have like a lecture with 300 people, and the prof is gonna whiz through all this new content. It's gonna like fly by you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that although IB was helpful in terms of like the content, you're still gonna have to learn because you're not gonna know everything, one. And then two is that the time you spend in class isn't as good quality as your quality time you'd spend in like a high school class.
Just to
Questions that everyone asked.
sorry.
Oh,
Just add in from like a commerce perspective really quick. I took higher level econ, and so for me that's actually a mandatory first year course in commerce, but because I took it in higher level and I got over a 5 in it, that's the minimum, they essentially transferred the credit over, so I didn't have to take econ, and it was just marked off on my transcript as completed. And so in a sense I already completed it in high school, which made it a little easier going to university because I didn't have to take that course on top of everything else.
mm-hmm. Right. So like with IB, I think it really depends on like your school, like what higher level, what standard level courses they offer, and then like kind of how that correlates with the courses or you're taking in university and also the program itself. And then like Michelle has mentioned, a lot of the IB courses, if you get over a certain grade, you're able to transfer your credits over to university, and I think it's quite the same for AAP, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's always super helpful because you can take other courses you're interested in, and you don't have to retake that course in university. So awesome.
I don't think engineering allows it. I think that might be the one program in,
Okay.
but I might be wrong. I just want
to okay, awesome. Okay, so we're gonna just move on to experiences, so like clubs and ECs at Queens. I think this would be really interesting to hear from all of you, just given kind of the diverse programs you guys are in. So maybe briefly, each of you can just touch upon like what was your involvement in clubs, ECs, or sports during your first 2 years, any like first year internship or research opportunities, anything you want to highlight. So why don't we start with maybe Michelle?
I was just answering your question. I think for me, one of the biggest things in terms of internships was really just putting myself out there with networking events. So I had a question about this earlier in terms of my PwC internship for next year. I got that through going to a networking event and basically just talking to people, hearing about their programs. And through that, I learned that they have a summer conference every year. And so I applied for the summer conference, which would have been this year, with an internship next year. Mm-hmm. And so as I got that position, then I was able to get the internship for next year as well. And also, I mentioned earlier in my bio that I was part of the Queens Accounting Association. So as a part of that, I did a case competition that was sponsored by Bell, for example. Mm-hmm. So basically the prize for that Bell competition was a dinner with their recruiters. And so when we got to that dinner, me and my team, we were able to sort of talk to them about their experiences working at Bell, listen to them about how they would go through the process of applying there. And so I think really just putting yourself out there and trying out a whole bunch of different activities and events, and also just putting yourself, like getting out of your comfort zone and going to events you wouldn't normally go to, it really gives you a chance to put yourself out there and see what you're most interested in and what sort of fits the best for you, so you can find what suits you the best as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, for sure. Like I think case competitions are always like a really great way in university to not only just get that experience with collaboration, working on a case, but a lot of times you can also like speak with recruiters and everything, so that's always really, really awesome for networking purposes. Jacob, do you want to touch upon like your involvement at Queens during the first 2 years?
Yeah, of course. I actually when I first went to Queens, they have this like sidewalk club thing. I don't know if they'll still have that with COVID, but basically what it is that all the club representatives come to like a street on Queens campus, and they just kind of like come and talk to you guys. Like you can walk up to them, you can talk about the clubs, and they just come and advertise your clubs. And in first year, when I went and did that, I got really involved with SWAM, like I described earlier, and Queens Pre-Law Society. And what ended up happening was that I joined those two clubs in first year as a general member. And then in second year, I actually got executive positions in both of them, which really helped me in my IB application. So I guess what I wanted to say was that if you are involved in a club and if you get like an exec position, by becoming involved, being there, and just putting your best foot forward, you can get some really nice leadership experience that can transition to some real life experience. And I'm not entirely sure about artside clubs. I'm not entirely sure about commerce clubs, but artside clubs generally tend to be a little more lax, and it generally tends to be more of a friendship kind of vibe than sort of like a business kind of vibe.
Right. Yeah. I actually really liked what you said about like, it's totally fine if you're just like a general member in a club for your first year, for example, because it is quite competitive. But I think like as long as you're genuinely interested in the clubs and ECs you're involved with, and you're constantly showing up, right? You're showing that engagement, you're showing face, you're meeting and getting to know the executives of the clubs. It really helps with your executive application for second year or the year after. So that's a really, really good point. Michael, do you want to talk a bit about your EC experiences?
Sure. About what Jacob was saying about the sidewalk sale, they're doing that online now. I don't know how they're gonna swing that, but
virtual.
He had a good point, because that's where I found out about a whole ton of clubs. And so things like Best Buddies is something I've been doing for a long time now. Synapses, that I found out about that in the sidewalk sale, because they had a booth up. I was on the Queen's Blood team for a couple of years. I sold varsity jackets. I sort of did a little pick and choose because I wanted to spread out and see what this whole place was about. So I tried to get a finger or a toe wet in, every aspect of the school. So I did some, in first year, I was pretty quiet. It took me until second semester to sort of get the ball rolling, and I did some, I'd never tried coding anything before, so I figured, hey, what better way to do it than, trying to join a club. Did some marketing work, did some design work, then went and got hitched with Synapse, and I sort of stuck with that between work, that research, and school. I figured I'd have a full plate, and that's where I've been since.
Awesome. I think like there's really a few ways, you can approach like your club involvements and ECs. I think some people, they want to just like, they already know what they are interested in, and they just want to like get a deep dive into that one, the select few clubs. But I think another really awesome experience that you can bring to university would, if you kind of explore and like kind of like what Michael did, just be involved in a few clubs, try different things potentially each year, because there's just a lot of clubs at university. It's not like high school where there's maybe just a select few, but there's a ton, and there's really something for everyone. So it's just really important as well to kind of explore your interest and maybe try something new that you've never done before. And then maybe Sophia can also touch a bit about this question as well.
So in first year, I actually didn't do like too many clubs, or at least in first semester. I was more so just kind of worried about getting accustomed into like my academics first, and like my social life, which is like fine, because I know there's a lot of pressure going to clubs, and if it's not really one that catches your eye right away, there's no rush. However, I did start getting involved in the food bank because I've always just like done volunteer work at food banks at home and when I was in high school. And so I just thought that it's always just like, it's really low commitment, it's really easy, but also just makes you feel good, help out the Queens community. And so I like doing that. And there's like a lot of range of like kind of involvement you can do. You could do like, at the food bank, I work for like 1.5 hours once a week, and I don't really have to do anything but I sit there and just kind of like keep track of who's coming in and out. And so that's like for if you want to do some involvement, but you don't have much time, you can still get involved in like light ways like that. On the other spectrum, like I'm the director of like a engineering conference at Queens called Queens Global Energy Conference. And so that's a lot more of my time that I have to put into it, but I'm also just really passionate about the topic anyways. And like, I'm doing a lot of kind of like professional skills doing the job. And so you can really kind of find on like any spectrum of like clubs and ECs where you want to like place yourself and how much involvement you want to put into the student body. For first year internships, I worked at Hatch after my first year. Someone asked me how I was able to get that role, and honestly, I was just pretty lucky. I went to a conference that I was invited to, and at that conference, they had a specific job fair where there were recruiters trying to recruit people to come work for them for internships. And so Hatch, since they do engineering, they had a lot of projects in just like renewable energy. So during the job fair, I went up to like the main guy and I just told him about my interest in the field. And I told him about all these projects I used to do in high school. Like I made a windmill at one point, like that. And so I just gave him my resume, and then he called me one day and said that I had an interview, and I wasn't even expecting it. So I think like how Michelle mentioned this earlier, I think that just like putting yourself out there at these kind of like networking events is really important. For me, I think because I was able to like provide in my resume, he was able to reach back to me and kind of tell me that he was interested in interviewing me. However, there's a lot of mixed kind of advice that people get about whether or not you should hand the resume to someone you're meeting for the first time at like a networking event. People would say it comes off a little bit too abrasive. Some people say maybe you should try to like schedule a coffee talk first and maybe like try to connect with them over like common interests or learn more about their experience. Some people say just like bring your resume and give it to them. I felt comfortable at least giving my resume because it was like a job fair. So it was a setting to kind of recruit for like internship. So if you're in that kind of setting, just make sure that you have like your resume printed. But if you don't even have your resume with you, but you want to create a network with someone at a company you're interested in, just like give them your name and maybe your LinkedIn, and then just tell them that you're interested in like reaching out to them for like a coffee chat.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think like, especially since you're like the event was catered towards like kind of recruiting and like job fair, it makes sense that, you know, I guess recruiters are also kind of expecting to get a few resumes. So I think in those cases, you just got to be like prepared, have a few on hand. And I guess it just doesn't really hurt to be prepared in that sense. And like, if you see that it's a good, you know, it's a good timing, good fit, the recruiters that you're talking to seems like receptive of the idea, then like it doesn't really hurt. Because yeah, I've definitely heard of a lot of friends like either like Michelle or Sophia that have gotten internship opportunities or at least interview opportunities that have led to internships through that kind of in a sense informal like networking or meeting. So yeah, really, really awesome. Okay, we're just gonna move on to residence life. I know like some people had questions about like how is that like, you know, is it worth it, you know, because it's COVID right now. Is, you know, the residence life in first year like something that everyone should experience? What are some best residences and stuff? So yeah, maybe Jacob could start with sharing your experience.
Yeah, for sure. I can only really speak about the main campus experience because I did go to Queens for 2 years, but I've actually never set foot on West. So I'm not sure if West is actually the best, Michael.
It is not.
West Campus, if you guys don't know, is a secondary campus. That's about like 10-15 minutes of a bus ride away from the main campus, and in the winter it's a brutal walk. It's really cool. Anyway, main residences, the big ones I can think of is Victoria Hall, Leonard Hall, Brant Hall, Gordon Brockington, and McNeil. They're all like very similar in terms of size and location. They're all in the same kind of southwestern cluster of campus. So as far as the location goes, it's about the same. Victoria Hall is the biggest res by far. It holds around 500 students, but because of that, people pull the fire alarms like 24/7. So I lived in Vic Hall in first year, and basically what ended up happening very often was that at 3 a.m. someone would pull the fire alarm and everyone would have to come out and wait out in the cold. If you don't want that, don't go to Vic Hall, but it is also the most fun res. There is the most amount of student experience, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But Brant, Watts, and Smiths, I believe, are the new reses which is a little more expensive. And they're single plus, which basically means that it comes with like a bathroom attached that you share with one person. And they're the nicest. They have an AC, I believe, and none of the other reses do. But as far as experience goes, they're all really similar. They're all like the rooms all look practically identical. And if you ever want to go visit a friend in a different res, it's only like a 2-minute walk. So I think no matter what happens, as long as you're not placed on west, it will be a fun time. And if you're placed on west, it will be an extra fun time.
Awesome. I think with every university, there are some, residences that are more like fun, like there's definitely that community aspect, and then there's some that are more quiet, and there's some that are, I guess, newer, like newly renovated. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Sophia, do you want to talk a bit about your experience?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure how residence is going to work with COVID, but from my experience, I was from Leonard Hall, which is not the biggest residence, Victoria Hall is, but it's like a medium-sized one. And it's one of the older ones, so it's really kind of gross. Like, the building itself is really dirty, and there are no elevators, or at least the elevators, they disable them during the year just because people just kind of have ruined the opportunity for us by doing things they shouldn't do, I guess, in an elevator. I don't know. But I remember I lived on the 4th floor, and the cafeteria is on the basement floor, so which is floor 0. So every time I go eat, I have to walk like 5 flights of like stairs. So good exercise for that. However, the room itself in Leonard was pretty nice. It's pretty big. If you have like a single room, I remember I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a single room or a double room going into Queens, because I thought that it would be harder to make friends if I didn't have a double room or things like that. I'd like to say, at least from my experience, that myth is debunked at Queens, just because all the residents are so close together. You don't really have to worry about like having a hard time making friends or meeting people if you have a single room. Like, you're gonna have that experience to socialize anyways, because everyone's already living in the same building, and everyone's already living in the same like 5-minute radius of campus. Something that was really random. The residences are kind of dirty if you're not in one of the new ones. And so I always got sick at residence, and all my friends on my floor was always very sick, because my floor also just had a lot of people on it all the time, and it was a very rowdy floor at least, and so everyone was very sick all the time. So if you have a weak immune system like me, you might get sick.
Yeah, honestly, I remember like with my first year, like I was also on res at Western, and honestly, like if one person got sick in the building, I think like with the air ventilation and everything, like everyone got sick.
Yeah.
There's like times where like a bunch of people got sick at a time. So definitely that's something like to consider when you're living on res. But yeah, anyone else want to quickly touch on their residence experience? If not, we can move on.
I feel like I should root for West a little bit here. But,
Michael, let's
so the pros, there are tons of cons, but the pros is that you get your own dining hall smack in the middle of the place, so you don't have to change out of your PJs to get breakfast. There's also a lecture hall attached to it, so if you're in science, it's not a bad place to be, because you pretty much live in the same building nonstop. But if you don't want to be on West Campus, if you have asthma, an MCL injury, a sore foot, anything you can get a doctor's note for, they will put you on main campus. I had the friend who came from my high school. He's 6'7", and he used that as a disability because he wouldn't fit in the West beds. So they were like single plus it is. You get the big beds.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So I guess it really just depends on like your individual preference and everything like that. Okay, so I think we're running a bit short on time. So basically with transportation, like a lot of other universities, there's bus passes included in your student fees. And I think a lot of people, if they don't take public transportation, you can pretty much walk everywhere. And I think you guys have also mentioned that Queens is a pretty like small campus in the sense that you can just walk from one place to another. So let's just talk a bit about financial aid, because I know this is something that some people are wondering about as well. So what are some resources, both externally and also within the university, that people can kind of look out for and apply for? So maybe Michelle, if you can speak on this a little.
So when you're going into Queens, there's an automatic scholarship based on your admission average. So I think the lowest one starts at about 80 or 85%. And there's one for, I think, about 90 or so. And then there's one for 95 plus. And so depending on what your admission average is, you're automatically given a scholarship if you fall within that range. And they'll automatically take that off your tuition. And I guess also for me, I used that, and I also used like just OSAP and just government grants and loans. And so you eventually have to pay those loans back, but that is something that can help you in the beginning. I really don't have too much more to add on to financial resources. So I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about that more.
Maybe Michael or Sophia, if you guys have anything else to add, but I think based on kind of the points here, this is something that everyone can just kind of look into. But Michael, it seems like you want to touch upon this a little.
Yeah, I got 2 big points. One, if ever in your life there's a time the government gives you free money, take it. So if most of you are going to be eligible for CESB or CERB, whatever it is. So hop on that. But the other thing is there's a lot that's hidden. So yeah, there are the automatic entrance scholarships, but if you do a little bit of digging, I'm not sure what the deadlines are like, so maybe they've passed already, but there's a lot that you can find in terms of bursaries. There's not a lot of advertisement for Queen's bursaries, but if you can find them on your Solus account, you'll know what that is when you apply. And you just enter in like 3 lines of information, and if you qualify, and most people do, you just get free money. So it's worth looking into.
Awesome. Yeah, I think a lot of these resources, they're definitely available. They're definitely out there. You just really have to do the research, do a bit of digging, and just apply to them. Honestly, apply. Like I've heard that there's actually a lot of scholarships or funding that's available to students in general, and it's just like nobody's applying, and that's kind of the end of it. But like, yeah, definitely take advantage of it if you can. If we have nothing else to add, we're going to just move on to the Q&A portion. So I'm just going to take a look at the chat and see. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop it right now, and we can answer them. Just seeing if there's any that are unanswered. Okay, I think we got one question here. So Miriam asks, what do you guys think is a competitive average to get into Queens? So maybe each of you can kind of talk about like the ballpark of your program. So Michelle? Yeah.
I think they say that the minimum for commerce, I think, is around high 80s. But I think competitive average would be low 90s, I would say, like 90, 92 area, roughly.
Okay, awesome. And then Michael?
Yeah, so for science, I needed an 80% to get in, and the class average was a 89.9. But there is so many people that applied with mega high marks that brought up that average. So there were a lot of people that applied with 80 on the dot and got in.
Yeah, I think it just like really varies like between program and also year to year. Maybe Sophia can also touch for chemical engineering, like what was the competitive average?
I think in engineering, the average last year to get in was low 90s, I think so, because I think they publish it every year. And so this is like you can find it on Google if you were to look it up. However, what's nice about engineering in Queens, at least, is that in your first year, you do a general engineering kind of program. And so everyone takes the same set of courses. And it's like 6 courses for both semesters, so it's a pretty heavy load. But then in second year, then you get to specialize and get to do chemical engineering, mechanical, any sort of that
Mm-hmm.
engineering, and it's not competitive at Queen's, meaning that you can go into any of those fields of engineering in second year without needing a minimum grade. So this is different compared to other schools because most schools have like a cap where they only get a certain amount of people for each type of engineering, and they all usually have like a minimum grade for each type.
Mm-hmm.
So to get into engineering at Queen's, I think is like generally like harder because it's like a higher average to get in. But once you're in, they try to keep you in and they make sure that it's not competitive for you to pursue what you really want to do, which is good.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think that like the structure, you know, there's like a high competitive average to get in, but then I guess in a sense it's like relatively easier to maintain throughout the years. So that's something important. Like there's definitely distinct differences between like universities and the various programs. So definitely look into that. I think we're just going to quickly take 2 more questions because we are running behind on time. But one question I thought that was pretty interesting would be like since Queens doesn't have co-op, how do you guys find career opportunities? And maybe Michael and Sophia can touch upon like who is the hardest prof for first year science, and then finally just what is the best thing you've learned from your time at Queens, or like what's one thing one piece of advice, one thing you'd want to share with our audience today about Queens. So do you want to, let's start with Michelle again. So yeah, basically I guess how do we find career opportunities, and then like what's one takeaway or best piece of advice, last advice? Yeah.
Definitely networking, I would say, and going to just a whole bunch of different campus events and I guess virtual events for this year. Another thing I would say is just research opportunities online. A lot of them you won't find. Like a lot of people won't talk about them. You just have to sort of look for them online. And even if they don't immediately offer an internship, but it gives you some sort of face time or some sort of rep with the company itself, take advantage of it because you never know where an internship can come out of from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. And then Michael, same question, but maybe instead of like career opportunities, we would like to touch upon like who is the hardest prof for first year science, and what is the best thing you've kind of taken away from your time at Queens as a fellow grad?
Sure, the 2 in 1. So the hardest prof is tough because what makes a harder prof is just somebody that doesn't spoon feed you the information. So there's more independent work involved.
Right.
For me, I didn't necessarily go to class a ton first year. So a lot of it was just independent, and that was my fault. But for me, I guess it was Virginia Walker. I just didn't like her voice. So it made listening to anything brutally painful.
Uh-huh.
And sorry, what were the other questions?
Just like your takeaway, like what's one piece of advice you'd give to incoming students or students looking to come to Queens?
One piece of advice would be to try to get involved in as many different parts of Queens as you can and diversify your interests. And I guess smell the roses is the theme.
Awesome. Short and sweet. And finally from Sophia, so maybe, you know, anything else you want to talk about in terms of your program or experiences, and then like what's the best thing you've learned from your time or so far at Queens?
I think that the best thing I've learned so far from my time at Queens is something that Michael already kind of touched on, and about like how profs like spoon feeding you information kind of makes them an easier prof, is that at university everything is a lot more individual than it is in high school. And I'm sure like everyone's high school teachers like told them that before, but it's actually true. So you should listen to them. I found that since lectures were just like, for me at least, for a lot of them like basically useless, or at least for most of them like pretty useless, because they cover a lot of material very, very quickly. They don't answer questions, and it's all kind of like new abstract stuff that you just have to kind of absorb right away. And I'm kind of like a slower learner, and so I like to ask a lot of questions while I'm learning something. But because of like this nature where your in-class time isn't as good quality as like in your high school. You really depend on yourself a lot more to study for courses and take notes. You have to depend on yourself more to go out there and like smell the roses and kind of try to find which scholarship opportunities might apply to you or which extracurriculars are more interesting for you. And so I definitely have become a lot more independent going in university just because there's a lot more research I have to do in order to like do well in class or to kind of pursue what I want to do. At the same time, it's more rewarding because then you can kind of like create your own path of like how you want to spend your time at Queens. And so I think that, yeah, at least in engineering, you should try to stay on top of your lectures. Not necessarily, like you should definitely go to your lectures, but you should stay on top of like studying your notes more than like maybe paying attention because like the notes are more important. However, in first year, because I've gotten a couple questions about engineering at Queen's so far, since Eng is kind of a very like difficult program, at least for the first years, they kind of try to make it as easy for you not to fail. And so if for some reason you're having a very difficult time completing a course, you can also extend your course load to June, where you do something called, I forgot what the program was called, but you can kind of continue studying until June and stay at Queen's until June and write your school at the end of June. So it takes like a 6 course load and like makes it spread out to like 4, and you get a lot more help from professors that way as well. So although
That's J section you're talking about, right?
yeah, I forgot the J section. Although it is kind of scary that things are more independent, if you're in engineering, they're also going to help you a lot in first year.
Awesome. So it just seems like, you really got to put yourself out there. It's different from high school, but definitely a lot of fun for you to, really explore your interest, make new friends, kind of get involved in the different like volunteer experiences like within the like Kingston community or even on campus. So it's really on you to make sure like you're keeping up with everything and just staying on top of your work. So that basically concludes our panel for today. Thank you all so much, Michael, Michelle, Sophia, and also Jacob, who had to run a bit early. We hope everyone found this panel helpful, as well as the entire webinar helpful if you stay to the very end. If you do have any questions, feel free to email us or check us out through our website and also our social media. And then if you're interested in reaching out to our panelists from today with any questions, I'm sure they're more than happy to answer. So just, like we talked about in the first panel, in terms of networking, sending like a message, just keep those things in mind. And yeah, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Especially in a panel like this where there's a lot of people in the call, if you're adding someone on LinkedIn afterwards, in the message when you're adding them, just introduce yourself and tell us that you were at the Queen's panel so we know where we know you from to add you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I guess it also like creates another like touch point of like, I guess, commonality of like why, just like a connection between yourself and the person you're reaching out to. So really awesome point, Michelle. But yeah, feel free to contact them. And then these are our upcoming webinars. So we have 4 more. We're like already halfway through our Tuesday talks this summer. So if any of these are interesting to you, please be sure to follow us on our social media. We'll have all our registration forms and links and everything like that. And be sure to subscribe to our newsletter because that's when you're going to get all the updates first. And so, thank you guys so much for sitting on today's panel. Really appreciate your time and for all the valuable insight you guys have shared. And yeah, thank you guys so much.